The next thing I'm going to talk about is the FX limited series Clipped, which is focusing on the infamous scandal that basically engulfed the Los Angeles Clippers when the then owner of the Clippers, Donald Sterling, was recorded by V. Stiviano making some, for lack of a better term, incredibly racist remarks. Some shit that just does not sound great when you hear it. I think we all probably remember this incident when it went down in 2014. It sort of swept the nation and took over the nation by storm, especially social media when it went down. That was kind of when social media was starting to become massive in terms of news and information spreading, but also just the reaction time of things and how people reacted to this particular situation was it was huge. And I remember it vividly when it all went down. But, as we all know how this story ended, the NBA ended up forcing Donald Sterling to sell the team, once they found this secretly recorded conversation and once it went public. They pretty much had no other option, and they gave him a lifetime ban from the NBA. And Donald Sterling, incredibly successful businessman. He was a real estate tycoon in Southern California, obviously owned the Clippers, billionaire, very, very successful, owned the team for decades and decades, I think since like 1981. But, this is a story, again, about another Los Angeles basketball team in the wake of what we got a couple of years ago with HBO's Winning Time. And I couldn't help but think about that show in watching Clipped, because even in the marketing of the show, they presented it as the infamous scandal about LA's other basketball team, because the Clippers have often been playing second fiddle to the Lakers, and Winning Time, obviously telling a much different story, but certainly chronicling a certain era of the Lakers, the 80s Showtime era of the Lakers. As we know, that show ended prematurely. It was canceled by HBO, but Clipped is focusing really on this very specific moment in time that has been kind of the biggest news stories to come out of the Clippers organization, because they've not won a title. They've not had too many significant playoff runs. Like, they're just not the greatest organization in basketball, but this has plagued them and was a black eye on their organization and really the entire NBA. But the show it's a complex story because it's tackling race and privilege and wealth and sex and fame, all of these things. And, it doesn't tackle all of those topics in the best ways. I think in particular, there was one episode of this 6-episode limited series that was a flashback trying to really unpack what privilege and wealth meant to all of the respective characters. I think it bit off more than it could chew. It was a little too far, or maybe a little too ambitious for what the show actually is, because I find Clip to be, and this is not a pejorative, I don't mean to say this in a negative way, but it's an appropriately trashy show for the subject matter that it's covering. Like, this is not the most dramatic, greatest writing you're ever going to find in a show. But because of what the subject matter is, because we're following a character like Donald Sterling, it actually lives up to, I think, what they set out to do, because the performances themselves by the main quartet of actors, Lawrence Fishburne is Doc Rivers, Ed O'Neill is Donald Sterling, Jackie Weaver plays his wife, Shelley Sterling, and then Cleopatra Coleman plays V. Stiviano. She's sort of a revelation in the show. They're all really good. I like them all, even though Lawrence Fishburne, his Doc Rivers impersonation, questionable at best. But what he was going after in terms of the characterization and what Doc Rivers had to walk into and the pressure that he had, and also knowing that this organization is led by a guy who doesn't care about anybody's personal well-being. He views these players as property. Knowing what Lawrence Fishburne had to convey in terms of those emotions, I think he did a good job at that. But the rest of the cast, who they cast as the basketball players, absolute fucking miss. They didn't get anybody right. They did a terrible job at casting the basketball players. Who they got for Chris Paul, who they got for Blake Griffin, their Steph Curry stand-in, all these people, no. They did a terrible job. It's actually goofy when you see some of them, because not only do they not act like these people or even try to act like these people, none of them resemble who they're portraying. And it's oftentimes somewhat of a distraction. They're not the leads of the show. They are supporting characters, but we do get a good amount of time with them. And the casting choices here are just baffling to me. They're just absolutely baffling. But even, going back to the primary cast, I think Ed O'Neill did really, really great as Donald Sterling. He's obviously portraying this super bigoted person. And sometimes you can't help but laugh at how out of touch he is, how ignorant he is, how how just completely nonsensical his thoughts of his ideas are. But it's a really cartoonish performance at times, and that might work for you. Sometimes it worked for me. Oftentimes I'm like, all right, this is a little bit too much. And I think, when thinking about the show in totality, I don't know if it needed to be made a mini series. I don't know if we needed 6 parts of this. Probably would have worked better as just a nice 2-hour movie, recounting this, or just a documentary, because it is based off of a podcast series, the Sterling tapes that came out a few years ago. It was a 30 for 30 podcast series that they did, but I think it just would have been better as a tightly constructed 2-hour movie, just a drama. A little bit of comedy here and there is fine, but just a drama that was based on this incident. I don't think we needed 6 episodes. They bit off a little bit more they could chew, but it was okay. It was fine, but I do think it's one of the more entertaining watches that you could just watch casually. You can do something else. You can cook and clean up, text, whatever you want to do. Just have it on in the background. You'll get exactly what you need out of the show if you just, find something else to tap into.
Yeah, that's just hilarious, man. I do like the idea that it is, again, like a trashy watch, like you said, given what the source material is. So that being like, that makes me want to watch it, but like, I don't know if I want to put in 6 episodes of that.
Tall
you know what I'm
task,
saying?
yeah.
Like, I don't know. Yeah, that's a tall task. So, I might check out like 1 or 2 on purpose and then be like, okay, now I'm out of here.
The first 3 are the best. If you dip your toe in, I'll say the first 3. After that, you kind of don't need the rest.
Yeah, it's hilarious. But yeah, it was an interesting predicament that the Clippers were always put in, though. You know what I mean? Like, and like you said, the Doc Rivers stuff and like just all of that was interesting. And also, kind of after you saying the casting is bad, I kind of just want to see like what Chris Paul did they get? What who are these guys that they hired? Like, in order to, especially we're talking about Winning Time, which I thought Winning Time was killing it. I thought
they did great.
I was like, oh, Winning Time is going crazy over here. So yeah, it kind of makes me. It's almost like a flip side of Winning Time in a lot of ways. Like, oh, here's what else it could look like if it wasn't on HBO. So yeah, I might have to dip my toe in.
100%.